I am here to introduce you to Ann Kellerman. She is a licensed social worker, and she's the director of psychosocial and spiritual care for the section of palliative care at MedStar Washington Hospital Center in Washington, D.C. She conducts patient care, she teaches, and she participates in a variety of research projects. Prior to that, she was the first palliative care director at MedStar Good Samaritan in Baltimore, and she's the founding director of the Palliative Social Work Fellowship Program at Washington Hospital Center. Also, if that wasn't enough, she is an assistant professor of medicine at Georgetown University Medical Center, where her research there includes the intersection between language, medicine, and intimacy. So, wow, we've got a very accomplished person here to speak today, so I am going to let her speak. Anne, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Amy, for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen and just go through a few slides, but mostly I was hoping we could spend the hour having a discussion about how everyone has been coping and how we're all holding up through this. As I was reflecting the other day that we're really about 6 months into COVID and really recognizing that this is just not here for the short term. And so how we can all deal with the physical distancing, managing virtual teaching if you have children, and continuing to go to work. So let me share my screen and I'll show you some of my slides. Okay. So when we talk about self-care, here's some questions that I came up with that I just will hope to facilitate a discussion. How can we take care of ourselves emotionally? How can we remain connected in the era of COVID with all of the physical distancing and some of us who maybe haven't seen our family or our children or in months? And how can we stay well, not only physically, but emotionally? So if you have thoughts about these questions or maybe things that are working for you, I invite you to just put that into the chat. And as soon as I'm done with these slides, we can start getting to the questions. So I am a licensed social worker, as Amy said, and we are always, social workers as a discipline are always talking about self-care. It's huge in our field and a big part of how we are able to maintain and sustain ourselves in this work. So some of the strategies that just come to mind when I was putting together these slides, and I have a lot of nature images because that's certainly what helps me, is getting outside and being out in nature. But one of the keys to, or one of the tips for self-care strategies is setting boundaries. So boundaries might look like to you is saying no to doing extra things outside of, business hours if you're working, or if you really are feeling exhausted emotionally, saying no to, friends or family who might be getting together or might be hosting the 5th Zoom that you've done and you're just kind of zoomed out. Breathwork is a lot of just being aware of when you're breathing. And in the next couple of slides, I offer some resources. But there's so many times throughout the day, if you just come back to your breath, and you'll actually recognize, and I do this often, where I realize that there's so many times where I'm holding my breath or my shoulders might be tense. In fact, now I'm going to relax a little bit because I'm noticing that, or also noticing just where you carry stress in your body. And the last one is positive self-talk. I facilitate a group for some of the oncology fellows at the hospital. And we talk a lot about how medicine as a discipline trains doctors sort of to always be the best or always have the right answer. And so there's so much that can be going on in your own sort of negative self-talk, and really be mindful of that and catching yourself when you're saying, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not fast enough, and really reframing that into positive self-talk. Even starting with simple as trying to think of 3 positive things you can say to yourself each day and working up from there. So I would recommend some of these meditation apps, and they are all free. They certainly have a paid version that comes with them, but I use Insight Timer as my favorite, and I just use the free version. And they have a lot of self-guided meditations that you can do. I think sometimes when we talk about meditation, people can get worried that it means you have to, meditate for an hour a day. You can start with 3 minutes, and on Insight Timer and Headspace and Calm, they all have very short meditations that you can do. And then there's just some resources here in and around the DC area. Most of the programs now in the Zen Center in New York, they're all offering a lot of online meditation and online through Zoom because of the physical distancing. I want to go back to the first slide because I really want to focus on the questions that I have posed here. And if you want to kind of put in some of your questions into the chat, I'm really hoping we can have a discussion here about how we're all managing best through this. And if others have tips or questions or something that's been troubling them of how to stay connected or how to manage emotionally. Put it into the chat, and then I think we will have somebody read out those questions. I'm going to stop my sharing. Do you have a question? Or how are you holding up emotionally? What keeps you going through all of this?
Well, I'm in good health.
Well, that's good.
I ride my bike, I exercise, I'm a techie. I really don't think much about it. I'm fortunate because I live in a community that I am isolated. I have access to stores to shop. You know, I'm not in a city environment, so I don't feel, and I'm retired, and I have a retirement income. So, you know, I'm in a very fortunate position. I can't imagine what it would be like to not be that, to be crowded in the city, to have limited resources financially. I don't. So I don't feel necessarily stressed. I don't, because of it. Okay, we have some questions.
It's also good that you recognize that you're in a position where you have.
It doesn't take much to realize that. And my friends, we're all very lucky at my age to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel compromised, even though I did have heart surgery. What special concerns are there for heart patients for this long isolation?
So I will speak to the emotional aspects of it and what I see in my clinical work, as I am not a doctor, to speak to the physical aspects. But I think what I have seen most recently in the heart patients that I care for at Washington Hospital Center, and the concerns that I'm worried about as a mental health provider, is the loneliness, the isolation, and the worry of, oh, even if I go out to the store, let's say you, I'm making this up, but had a recent heart transplant, and you're immunocompromised, you know, the worry of going out, being with others, and so really isolating in your home and not having the emotional connection that you have with other people. So that is concerning. And I think one of the things, I can put this in the chat so we can list it as a resource, but I think there are ways to get connected through online support groups. So if you are feeling lonely or isolated and you don't have somebody to talk about, and this is going to be continuing to go on for months, I think the thought was, oh, I can handle this, like back in March, I can handle this if it's just 2 months and I have to be in my house for 2 months. But then really now we're 6 months into this, looking into the winter. Thanks to Amy for the reminder of everybody to get flu shots, but just really looking ahead to a lot of this isolation. So I think one of my concerns are finding ways that you can stay socially connected with people while we have a lot of this physical distancing that's going to continue, especially for people who are immunocompromised.
Okay, I'm using this new feature, say, so now we have 2 spotlights. Another question, next question. Do you have any tips for managing the mask versus no mask conflict?
Oh, well, I am a big fan of masks. Do you mean as far as, I have kind of a follow-up question, as far as like if you get into a debate with a family member who maybe believes that masks don't work or we shouldn't be wearing masks? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think that's probably.
Is that probably?
You know,
Well, I always think that it's sort of like politics. Some things maybe are best left unsaid. So there is this huge debate going on right now, and I was somewhere recently where somebody was getting into that conversation, and I just remained silent and listened to it because I thought that it's so much energy that I'm going to have to take to try to convince somebody to sort of see things the way that I may see it. And I was also trying to reflect on, this is their lived experience. So I sort of think a lot of that debate, I try to do my best to protect myself by wearing a mask. And of course, as a healthcare professional, we have to wear masks wherever we are. So in the work environment, that's just mandated. So you can't go to work unless you have a mask. But I think when I have seen those debates play out, when I've been out in public, which I'm not going out that much, I tend to remain silent, sort of as I see that almost as two opposing political views. I don't know if others have thoughts on that.
Right. What should heart patients in particular be doing to stay emotionally healthy during COVID? Heart patients in particular.
Yeah, so when I talk with some of the heart patients I see about breath work, they get really worried that it means that they have to be taking a deep breath. And some people who are symptomatic with their heart failure and may be short of breath get concerned about that. So I also want to clarify that doing breath work and meditation doesn't mean that you have to be taking, really deep breaths. Any kind of work that you can do where you're finding yourself stressed or triggered, that you can do some simple meditations. And one would be, a very basic breath work is when you take an in-breath, smelling the roses, and then the out-breath is blowing out the candles. And that can just be so simple anytime you're feeling stressed and your body is feeling more tense, to help relax. And that is not something that is physically strenuous. That was the word I was looking for.
What types of services does your own department offer to heart patients, both in the hospital and once they return home?
Oh, sure. So our palliative care, so I should have maybe started by, I'm not sure how many people know what palliative care is, but oftentimes when people hear of palliative care, they think of hospice. And so palliative care is different in the sense that we see people at any stage of an illness. We're an interdisciplinary team. So we have physicians, social workers, chaplains, pharmacists, and we help improve your quality of life. So some of the work that we do is providing emotional and spiritual support. We also do help with advanced care planning and completion of advanced directives. We see people in the hospital who may be going to get a heart transplant or other advanced heart failure therapies like inotropes or LVADs. It doesn't mean that we continue along throughout their course of illness. And then we also have a clinic. So in addition to seeing people in the acute care space, we will follow up, and I'm part of the heart failure palliative care clinic, which is every Wednesday afternoon at the hospital center. And we have been doing most of them virtually, although recently we have started just opening the clinic back up to in-person visits. And so a lot of what we do is provide an extra layer of support while you're going through your illness.
I'll be there. Next question would be, what about nutrition as being part of staying emotionally healthy? And exercise.
You say nutrition and exercise?
Right.
Yeah. I think one of the most challenging, a personal story on this, I find one of the most challenging thing throughout all of COVID and when you're stressed is trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle. I think maybe something that has become easier is being outside, because everyone has been stuck in for so long. So even just getting out and doing a 10-minute walk in the morning and a 10-minute walk in the evening can be very helpful. In the apps that I described in the slides, there's walking meditation. So you can use the Insight Timer app and do a walking meditation. As far as a healthy diet goes, when I was talking about positive self-talk, I I think that certainly applies to nutrition because it can be so challenging to maintain a healthy diet, especially if you don't have access to grocery stores, if you're doing a lot of delivery or takeout. And I think the best is trying to work, and I don't know where your cardiologist that you see is, but trying to work, if they also work along with a nutritionist or a dietitian, and doing kind of meal planning ahead of time can help with some of that. Good question.
Yes, Brian has given a question. Brian asked, I have an 83-year-old mother and a few medical issues, and I have a new grandchild due in a month that will be living in my home. Do you have any advice on how to handle the stress that's going to result here?
What, I want to ask a follow-up question. What are you most worried about with the new baby?
What I can do in Brian's case is I can turn his video on and audio on. If you give me a second, he can answer.
Sure, that would be great.
So let me unspotlight myself.
And these are all great questions.
And let me get to Brian. Let me find him. If he's willing to come forward here. Where did he drop out? I don't see.
Sometimes people have different names.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's his name. Oh, here he is. And he doesn't have, oh, there we go. Okay, so no, he came back momentarily. I don't think we're going to be able to, where are we? Here we are. Okay, I'm going to ask Brian to unmute, and I'm going to start video so he can do both. Let me find him. Okay, we can hear you, Brian, if you talk. And you, and you, if you like people to see you, then you can unmute your video as well. I'll ask you to start your video. You know how to do that. Okay, so now that you're there, I will spotlight, we'll share. This is a new feature. Come on now, I see you. I don't know why I can't. Well, I can't spotlight your video, but people can see you and speak.
But I can see you.
Okay, so elaborate on your question.
Yeah, what are you most worried about with the new baby?
Just having to take and choose between dealing with mom and making sure the baby's safe.
Yeah. Do you have a separate space for your mom?
No, mom doesn't live with me, but she stays 10 minutes from here. But I'm her primary caregiver.
Oh, so you have to go over there daily to help take care of her, and then you'd be coming back.
Not necessarily daily, but quite regularly, often.
Yeah, yeah. And then the concern is how you make sure you're not exposing the baby to anything.
I expose them both to anything.
Yeah. I think the guidelines set out, wearing a mask, making sure you're frequently washing your hands. I think it's much more challenging when you're a primary caregiver to stay, you can't really just stay 6 feet away from your mom.
Right.
Or from a baby. So I think wearing, as best you can, wearing a mask and washing your hands as often as you can.
Yeah, I mean, right now, and I know the water bill is extremely high. Every time you go out, come back, take a shower, wash your clothes kind of thing. So I'm just wondering how to handle the stress with COVID and trying to do both, especially with the next month coming, the baby being due.
Yeah, that is a lot of stress because being a caregiver for somebody is more than a full-time job. And now you have a newborn coming, and that's
right,
another full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you also have to somewhere, and this might be better, this is probably easier said than done, is find time for yourself in there. And whether that's, even just blocking off time where it's in the morning or in the evening where you have, start with 10 minutes. Like I have 10 minutes where I'm doing a walk in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening, and then maybe even build up to 20 minutes. Because that's a lot of stress that you're going to be carrying, and just keeping in mind of where you, I don't know, you don't have to answer this, but where you carry stress in your body and sort of notice those triggers that come up. But ahead of time, before the baby comes, I would start by saying, what is your time? Is it going to be, getting up in the morning and taking 10 minutes and going for a walk, or is it going to be 10 minutes in the evening, or maybe both?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
See how that goes, but that's a lot. That's a lot.
Okay, Sam Day has a question. I can ask him to unmute as well or read it.
Sure.
But I think it's good if people can ask the question. Now, Sam Day has done our Facebook page and helped chapter out a lot here recently. So let me go through that process. Sam Day, I'll ask you to unmute, and I'll ask you to start your video. He can start his video, and then what I'll do here is I'll add a spotlight. So Sam, you're live. Go ahead and ask your question you typed to me.
Hi, Anne. How are you?
Hi.
It's nice to see you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Sure.
So I have a question about how should we handle, if people have bad or suicidal thoughts during this pandemic, because it's just taking so long and it's just frustrating, right? So what are there any suggestions, or are there any resources we could be aware of?
Yes, I'm glad that you asked this. And what I will do is I'll try to put this in the chat so this can get out to everyone. The first resource I would say is tell somebody that you trust. If you're having thoughts of, there's kind of a difference between a thought of, I'm just so sad. Like, I don't know how much more of this I can take. I'm so stressed all the time. I'm working a lot. I'm worried about my heart. And, that's different than, I just can't take it. I have a thought that I'll just go and, end things, and then actually having an active plan how you might end those things. If anyone's having those thoughts and, you have a plan, whether that be medication or, whatever that is, then you call 911 or call the suicide hotline. And I can put that information in here, the National Suicide Hotline number. And that is a great resource. And there's people that are trained, and that is a 24/7 resource. I also think it's important to talk to your doctor, because with this ongoing, it's if you're having the thoughts of, I'm so sad, it's just draining to continue this for so many months, then therapy and seeking a mental health provider. And you can get referrals from your primary care doctor or your cardiologist. Or another great resource is psychologytoday.com, and you can put in your zip code, and there's therapists and mental health providers that specialize in chronic illness, and that is a great resource. So sometimes you can find somebody through your primary care doctor, but the nice thing about Psychology Today, if it's easy for you to get on and have access to the internet, is that you can put in what your insurance is, because there's so many mental health providers that don't take insurance, and given the ongoing pandemic, it can be really expensive for therapy too. And so it's good to find one who's in the network. Does that help? Oh, I think you're muted. Can we maybe unmute Sam? I think Jeff has to unmute you.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
and that's good. I have another question. So
Sure.
I think you mentioned a little bit about exercise during this period. So it's difficult to go to a gym, obviously, for some of us, right? So are there online resources and things like that? I heard about YouTube and things like that, where people just sign on and they just attend something virtually. We can to get going.
Yeah, you can. There's lots of free yoga through YouTube. I am much more, if it's left up to me to go on and do a free yoga, I'm much more easier if I pay for a class. And so there's some yoga studios who are offering Zoom yoga. One that I go to is called Imagine Yoga and Wellness, and all their classes are relatively inexpensive, and they're all offered through Zoom. And there's other workouts that you can do through Zoom that are live with an instructor. And then there's lots of YouTube channels that have, whether it be Zumba or yoga or what is the other one that a friend of mine does that is more like a boot camp, weightlifting, depending on what you like, if it's cardio or weightlifting. I personally have a bias of just getting outdoors, because I think if I'm feeling stressed, just getting out in the fresh air. Now, it was really hot and humid in the summer here.
Right.
So now that it's becoming fall, just even, going out for a couple of walks throughout the day, or if you have pets and you have to, take the dog out for more frequent walks, that is a good way to get exercise in, just to get fresh air.
Just one last thing with winter coming up. We're already in fall, so with winter coming up, things get depressing more. Gets cold out, gets darker earlier, and stuff like that. So in those cases, again, we all have to talk to people and things like that, right? But any special things we should be doing?
I think that as winter comes, finding people that you can stay connected with is key, because as winter comes and there's all this concern that there's going to be more of a surge in COVID and who knows what will happen, find out kind of who your resources are. And when I say resources, like who are your people that if you're feeling down or depressed, you can go to and talk to. I think if you find a good therapist, now most therapists are doing everything through Zoom. And it used to be, it is a big challenge to actually try to get yourself to therapy with just everyday life struggles. But now that that's offered through Zoom, and it doesn't have to be weekly, it can be once a month, to have somebody to check in with that can offer these continued resources of how to take care of yourself.
Great,
I also think just being aware of where, I think I had said this before, like where you carry stress in your body and what are your triggers. So a lot of social work practice is good self-care and knowing, okay, well, I'm feeling this way, and right now everyone that talks to me I'm just finding so irritating, or whatever it may be. And then that might be a clue to, well, what's really going on with me? What am I really worried about? What am I really sad about? And maybe I need to take a day off, or maybe I just need to spend an hour. People get really connected to books. Maybe I just need to spend an hour, by myself every day if I can, reading a book.
Yeah, or cooking. I find it's relaxing to cook or something like that. Thanks so much.
I am not a chef, so that one doesn't speak to me, but yes, I'm glad you brought it up, because so many people find cooking therapeutic.
Okay, I've taken his spotlight. Let me say something, if I might.
Yes.
I keep myself active. Okay, I find that helps me. I've never really thought about the stress, like I mentioned. I'm fortunate. I want to bring out something. If you have a Montgomery County Library card, and they're free, did you know that there's a company that has training courses called The Great Courses? I don't know if you've ever gotten a catalog from them. If you look through the great courses, and you'll see there's subjects on cooking, photography, tons of things that you might have an interest in. Anybody here is listening. It's true, okay? Now, these courses cost money sometimes, $150, $200, $300. I just want you to know that if you have a Montgomery County Library card and you install Canopy, or you log into Canopy with your credentials from your library card, every one of the great courses is 100% free. This is pretty significant. So if you think that you have an interest in learning woodwork, how to draw, I took a magic thing. I started like a little card trick stuff, and things, anything you can think of. You could look through the great courses online by, just go to their website. Once you know the course number or the name, and you start Canopy and you're logged in through your library card, you can find that course, and it's free. Just to let you know, it's a very good way to pass your time. We have some other things.
I was putting in the suicide hotline there, so we can always just send that out later.
Yeah, well, we can. I'm just I'm looking through some of these questions.
But as you do that, that's a great idea. I know my library does all free pickup now, so they have curbside pickup for books and audiobooks.
Right. What are some of the things that people could do? People might be afraid to visit doctors, for example. And they're hesitant to make these appointments now. You have any advice there?
Yeah, I think that a lot of physicians are doing virtual visits, and that hopefully will continue for some time. I know a lot of mental health providers, if not all mental health providers, are doing virtual visits. A lot of physicians are doing virtual visits. Our clinic has been virtual since March, and just now we are starting, if last Wednesday when I did our palliative care heart failure clinic, we probably had 10 virtual visits and one person that came into the hospital, and that was only because he had another test there. So I think that is a real concern. And in protecting yourself, reach out to your physician and say, I'm not comfortable coming in, but I'm not, these are the symptoms I'm having, and can we schedule a virtual visit? And a lot of those are just done through different, probably not Zoom, but different platforms that are HIPAA compliant.
Right. I've started going back to my doctors and making appointments, and for the most part, they all have their own procedures to follow.
Yeah.
I did find one thing wasn't comfortable with, and so you walk away from it, but it's good to get out of the house and stay socially separate from people.
And I think that that's a good point, because if you are out at a doctor's office and maybe somebody isn't wearing a mask and you're worried about that, it's okay. It's perfectly okay to say, I don't feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable in your clinic because there were people who were not wearing masks. Most doctors' offices are doing pre-screening. Well, they'll ask you if you're having any symptoms related to coronavirus. They'll take your temperature when you come in. And most are saying most, if not all, have signs that mandatory to wear masks.
So, Ann, you walk into a hospital every day. You've been dealing with these terrible times. How do you keep yourself positive and cope with the situation?
So that's a great question. So I think boundaries is a huge thing, especially at the height of COVID. So as Amy had said in my bio, we also have a fellowship program. So we have a lot of learners who are coming through, and I feel a responsibility to keep, the social work fellow who is working with me safe as well. I think for myself, it's making sure I'm staying 6 feet away, from people, always washing my hands frequently before I'm going into any patient rooms, using the hand gel. And I think setting good boundaries. So one of the things is making sure that I am leaving on time most days. There'll always be things that come up, but our service is extremely busy. So our inpatient census, not even any of our outpatient clinics, we can be taking care of anywhere between 90 and 120 patients each day. And we have a big team, but it can become overwhelming. So I've started saying no to more things and making sure that I leave on time. I also am big with staying active and getting outdoors, as I had mentioned before. So I try as best I can 3 or 4 times a week to make sure I'm doing a run before work, so I can get in a workout before I leave in the morning.
Okay, also to add to this, it's tough to exercise regularly, even go to a rehab. Are there virtual resources to share? I would like to tell people that, and you could tell me it's true, if you go to YouTube and you put in, older people, heart patients, exercises, et cetera, there's lots of stuff you can get for free, I believe.
Yeah.
So can you comment on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you can get for free. I go back to the meditation apps because those are free, and that will keep your mind kind of grounded. There are places that do offer sort of live workouts, but YouTube is just a great resource, and it doesn't have to be 30 minutes of exercise. You can start with 10 minutes, or 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night. But it can be hard to stay active, and depending on where you live, if you are in the city where it's densely populated, it can be hard to go out to get physical activity and also stay physically distanced from others. So, and also with I think it was Brian's point or somebody's point about, maybe it wasn't Brian, but somebody's point about it, it's going to be getting cold, so we are going to be spending more time indoors, and how you can utilize things like YouTube to get workouts in at home.
By the way, I have set the system so anyone can unmute I don't have to ask them. As long as we're well behaved, that's perfectly fine. Anger management. Let's face it, some of us are just angry, especially now with the kids, spouses, and neighbors. Now, you did touch on it, but how would you deal with this? People really can be angry. I find that.
I think first, go ahead.
No, I find that with some of my friends, one in particular is extremely cautious. So cautious so that, I know everybody has their own way of dealing with the situation, but, I know I've done what I think is realistic, and yet I still would like to be friendly and want to deal with them. But the way they handle themselves makes me feel that I don't really want to deal with my friend that I've known for many years. I try not to feel this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think it's important, and I don't know if anyone wants to unmute and say this, like, are you aware of what you're angry about? Or who you might be angry at, or just because when I start to feel angry or frustrated, I try to identify, well, what is going on with me? Like, why am I angry?
Well, I think it's because in this particular situation that particular person hasn't been less than honest with me, and feels that she doesn't feel I'm following the protocol that she's comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's the reason she may not, or they may not want to get together at a distance even. I mean, nobody comes, these people, or some people, of course, they're compromised, that all groceries are delivered. They haven't eaten out in restaurants in 6 months. Nobody's in their house except them. I mean, it's more extreme than I personally would do. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just chatting.
Jeffrey, hi everybody. Jeffrey, Ann, can you hear me? This is
Yeah.
Noel.
Yeah, all you got to do is unmute.
As we're coming down the home stretch here, I mean, we have a really great crowd here, and this is really an excellent session. I have one question I wanted to ask you verbally, and while I do this, Jeff, I'm going to suggest that you please go ahead and show everybody on video. I wouldn't unmute because there's so many people, but let's put everybody so we can see everybody's faces.
Well, everybody, if everybody wants to just unmute themselves, I mean video-wise, just do it. Okay.
Then
you can just go to gallery view, and then you can see everyone.
You go to gallery view, and you'll be able to see everybody.
Yeah. There's everyone. Hi.
There we go. I've actually received several requests.
Okay, good. Go to gallery view, and everybody wants to. You should be able to unmute your video. Leave your audio unmuted, though, so we don't walk over each other.
The request I had was to show everybody on video and to mute me, not just for today. But, while everybody,
everyone should be able to unmute themselves their video.
And there's Ash. Come on, Isabel. I want to see you. But Ann, I think one thing that we've been kind of tiptoeing around a little bit. It's a really stressful time for everybody, and not just COVID, although COVID is arguably the story of the century and then some. But we have a hard-fought political campaign going on right now. There are fires out west. There are a lot of really bad things that are happening. The Washington Nationals, I haven't looked in the past hour, are having a really bad time of it. There's a lot of news going on. And some people have said they find themselves just watching that news just for hour after hour after hour. What's your advice here?
Yeah, I've always been a fan of dosing my news coverage because, and I think I have, and also it's hard because we want to stay aware of current events, but I think you're right. It's not only COVID. There's this upcoming election in 50-something days. There is, the ongoing Black Lives Matter after the, murder of George Floyd and all of that. And all these protests that are coming up, the fires. And I personally try to stay aware of that, but also stay at a distance and recognize kind of what I can control and what I can do to advocate for the change that I want to see as far as, just everything. I think it can become really challenging to manage all of that. And just, again, finding ways that you can take care of yourself through all of this.
Can I chime in for 2 seconds?
Yes.
I have never felt any stress during these times, even though I have been an active visitor at the hospital, which is right now blocked to us. I keep myself pretty occupied. I don't watch TV. I watch TV, but not news.
Yeah.
I found it to be very,
Are,
very corruptive, very corruptive. I don't watch news, maybe half an hour in the day. That's it. I exercise, I read, I listen to music. There are ways to keep ourselves actively busy, mentally and physically. You know, so that's my recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
We have tools to use, but how do we use it? Which one do we follow and which one we keep away?
Yeah.
You know,
Amy's eager to dive in
Maybe
here.
something.
I have
Amy's
a,
really
yeah,
good.
I have a question. So
Sure.
Anne, I have a wonderful 85-year-old father who lives 4 hours away, who has heart problems, of course, but is a very busy guy. Pre-COVID, this guy left the house every single day for some kind of activity he was involved in. And he is now losing his mind. And I want to know, what are some things I can do to help him keep his sanity and not stress himself out until this, because we won't let him leave. We won't let him do anything because my sister and I are deathly afraid if he gets COVID, you know, we don't want to take him out. He's all we got. So anything I can do to help him keep himself together and keep my sister and I grounded.
Yeah. I that's hard. Are you comfortable? Because it sounds like you know, is he reporting now like I can't handle this, like being sort of tied down is too much because I've always been so active?
He told me he's starting to feel a little stir crazy is what he told me.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a 95, soon to be 96-year-old grandfather, and he's feeling the same way because he has been locked down in his assisted living facility. And I think that the biggest thing is just to listen and validate how hard that must be. I know personally with my grandfather, a lot of it was where people were trying to make what I call at least statements. Well, at least you've lived this long. Well, at least like you still have your mind. And that's just not really helpful. And that was becoming really frustrating for him. And just listening and validating. I can't imagine how hard this must be being in all the time, because the same as what you're describing as your dad. My grandfather's very active, always would leave. Just recently, you know, it was terrible when he, you know, had to stop driving and, you know, when he was 90. So I think just acknowledging, like, I'm here for you, Dad. Like, I want to be able to find ways for you to be active, but also be safe. And some of those might be if you and your sister see him, taking him out for drives, because I think some of the isolation is just being in his home, at least with, you know, my grandfather was just being, but getting out and going for a drive and maybe picking up some takeout. And does that
Yeah.
help?
I think so. Yeah, my sister is one of those, though, who is in relation to what Jeff was asking about with his friend. My sister is in the beyond overboard category. Yeah. So she does, and she lives near him, and she will visit, but it's sitting in the back of her car, and he's sitting in the back of his car, and they're like way far apart in the driveway. So yeah, I'm not sure how much help she can really be at this point. And I don't want to, you know, I don't want to tussle with her. I'm just not going to do that. We're too old for that.
Well, it's good that you recognize that. Not, you know, because everyone is sort of on the spectrum of sort of, you know, extremely isolating to, you know, the extreme of, you know, kind of there's then the other end of that.
Right. I mean, I'm contemplating just taking a drive up there, wearing my mask, and taking him out for a little bit, maybe a walk or something in one of his favorite parks, bringing him back, somehow trying to see my little niece in all of that, and then getting out, like just coming on back.
Yeah. Because there's ways, you know, that you can be safe and allow him to be more active. Because the isolation and the emotional aspect of it is really hard, especially for older adults.
Right, because he lives alone. He has been widowed for 23. He's been a widower for 23 years, but he's on the bowling team. He's at the senior center. He goes to the Y. You know, he has
Yeah.
a lot of he has a lot of friends and he hangs out with.
And then are there ways, you know, this can also be challenging, but are there ways to get him connected to, are there any other senior groups that are doing, you know, virtual bingo or something that he could do while he's at home, but distanced?
You know what? I will work on that with him. He has a
Usually,
computer.
yeah.
He has a computer. He has internet, so and Wi-Fi. So I will work on. That's a great suggestion. I appreciate that. I will look into that with him.
Usually calling like the Department of Aging with whatever county he's in, they always have great resources.
I will do that. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Sure. I know him.
And
Hi, Ann. Can I ask a brief question?
Yeah, Mark G has his hand up if he wants to.
Yeah.
yeah, I have two things that I would like to say.
Sure.
And
Who's talking?
it's
Mark
Mark.
G, I think.
Mark G.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah. One thing I want to echo with your sentiments about what you do before you go to bed. I think it's really, really important not to connect with what's going on out there because you're going to toss and turn all night. One of the things that I've gotten into is that I watched 6 years of the Golden Girls, and now I'm on the I Love Lucy series. You need to laugh before you go to bed. You don't need to deal with what's going on TV. And what's going on with the news, what's going on with today's paper. That's not what you do before you go to bed.
I like that you bring up the sense of humor because I think maintaining your sense of humor with all of this is really important. And I also think with the news and everything that's going on, and you know, speaking from a social worker and advocate for social justice, it can be very challenging because you want to stay active in a lot of the movements that are going on. But you also want to make sure that you have time for self-care. So I love the idea of before going to bed, watching something that has humor in it or being able to laugh.
The other thing I want to talk about is not something that you spoke of, but something that was spoken of before you started, which was about the flu shot. I just went through this on Friday, so I want to share this with the people that are there today.
Sure.
The flu shot potency is only good for 6 months. The flu season is worse in March. So what my pharmacist and a number of other doctors that I've checked with have said is make sure that you get your flu shot between now and the end of September and the beginning of October. Why is that? Because it takes 2 weeks for the body to build the antibody, and the potency lasts from when the 2-week period is up. In other words, 2 weeks after you get your shot for 6 months. So that takes you through March. So in reality, this is the perfect time to go out and get your flu shot.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to, if you know how to raise your hand, if you click the participant button down the bottom, in the screen that comes up, there's something that says raise hand. And then I'll just, if you're in speaker view, I'll make sure that you're spotlighted and you'll be together with Ann and everybody. You'll see our pictures, especially if you're in speaker view. Anyone?
Jeff, I've got a brief question here, and just a really brief one, and just to make a point. For those of us of a certain age, we remember the Ed Sullivan Show, where Ed would go on occasion and he would say, okay, today in the audience, we have a special guest in the audience. Take a bow, Sophie Tucker, or whoever, or Fred Astaire. Well, a couple of people much younger than that. We're in the presence of greatness here tonight. We have Daniel and Carol Dollarhide, a couple of youngsters here on there right now. A past president of our chapter, as is Neil Gregory. But Daniel and Carol are special friends. They're doing great. They're down there in Williamsburg and have started up a new chapter. Wanted to say just a shout out to them and ask you a brief question, Ann, related to them. Hi, folks. The question is, and I don't think Dan and Carol, I don't think I'm embarrassing you when I say this one, but they're people that I admire a lot for a number of reasons. One of them is they're people of faith, and as are a number of people in this group here. And there's an important element of the faith community as part of Mended Hearts, going back since its founding. For a lot of people, that's really important and maybe even a source of comfort right now. How do you and your team deal with that? Encourage people? What do you have to say about that in terms of helping us get through these crazy times?
Oh, yeah, we have two palliative care chaplains on our team, and they are a tremendous resource. And part of my job as a social worker, we're an interdisciplinary team, so I can ask questions around faith and spirituality. And almost always when I ask people, well, how are you doing? What's helping you cope with all of this? I would say that the probably almost the number one answer I get is, well, God, and I have my faith. And then usually that's like an indication for me to have them speak with one of our chaplains, who are both phenomenal. And then they can, further assess whether or not, I think that at the beginning of COVID, it was really challenging because we were now allowing individual spiritual care providers to come in. So it was mostly our two chaplains. So they became, that can be overwhelming. But I use them as a huge resource. And even within our clinics, they will come down and see clinic patients. So that's, in addition to that, we have a larger spiritual care department within the hospital.
Anybody else want to ask a question or raise your hand? And hey, if you use the speaker view and I spotlight you, you'll see Ann and you'll see yourself, and the whole group can see. It's like a discussion. This is good. Anybody want to ask?
I think Ash has a question, or his hand is raised.
Is his hand raised? I don't see that.
I think he just needs to unmute.
He's just on mute now. So does anyone want to?
Oh, there you go. He just unmuted.
I have a
question. Go ahead.
Anne,
Yeah.
What's your recommendation for those patients who are in the hospital but who are not able to get any visitors because of COVID-19? How do they handle the stress?
Yeah, we have been doing a lot of Zoom calls. So somebody donated 5 iPads to our palliative care department, and we have them set up with WebEx and Zoom. And I always first acknowledge that this is not the same. So we facilitate a lot of video calls with their families throughout their hospital stay. So that's one. 2 is, I think as of tomorrow, some hospitals are starting to allow 1 visitor again, and starting as of tomorrow, the hospital center will be allowing 1 visitor in shortened hours, but I think that will help. But I've certainly had to get used to the challenges of technology over the last couple of months. That has been challenging to try to fit in, to do the video calls when sometimes the technology isn't working. But that has helped. And then we have also just increased as best we can our visits. I think our referrals have gone up for a lot of the people who are isolated in the hospital and maybe have been there for a long period of time, let's say after a heart surgery or another surgery, and they're in the hospital for 2 months and just isolated from their family.
Okay. But does the iPad visiting program actually work? We have a program called iPad visiting program, basically that allows the patients to talk to the supporters like me.
Oh, so we'll do the in-person visit. So
Yes.
like I'll go see somebody, and then if they want to talk to their family, I can
Yeah,
link them with the iPad to connect them virtually with their family.
Yeah, the problem with that, I personally feel there's a lack of time with the nurses. They're so busy.
Yes.
They're so busy doing the regular work. On the top of it, saying, hey, take this iPad and connect to this patient.
Yeah, that's why a lot of times it has come down to our palliative care team helping with a lot of the video calls, because the nurses are busy with everything else they have to do. So we've had to take a lot of the initiative on ourselves, which is more work for us, but that's what we've done. We did, through the height of COVID in March and April and May, We
Yeah.
there were a lot of physical therapists and a lot of other disciplines like surgeons who weren't doing surgery. Well, that's a bad example, but physical therapists who got redeployed. And so they weren't working because their department wasn't operating. So then they became essentially like redeployed to various departments, and they were helping with a lot of the tablets and doing the video calls.
Thank you.
So, but good question.
Thank you.
Any more? Somebody want to have this conversation with Ann while we have a very good resource here? Either raise your hand or just speak, and I'll share the spotlight with Ann. Let's see.
Well, I think it's looking like everybody has had their questions answered. I've been given the signal to say maybe we could wrap up here. First, I want to say hi to Dan and Carol. Hi, I miss you guys. And I want to say hi to Marge. Marge is on. Marge Toronto. Good to see you, darling. If anybody else has any questions, they can reach out to one of the officers. We will be happy then by email to pass them on to Ann. Ann, I want to thank you. You have been invaluable today. I think this has been one of our best speakers yet. You really, really appreciate your support and your help. Let's give her a hand, everybody. Come on.
Everybody needs to unmute.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you so much for
Thank you, Ann.
so much for having me. This hour really flew by. I put my email, I put the National Suicide Hotline and my email in the chat, so that way you can share those if other people have questions. And I really appreciate you having me.
All right.
And
great.
what you should know is that Mended Hearts has over 200 chapters in the country.
Wow.
Several leaders from other chapters in other parts of the country are on this call right now. So I think you're going to be getting some more phone calls, requests
Really
from us.
popular, yeah.
Well, very cool. I feel like we could have a series of, since COVID is going to be going on, we can have a series of how we continue to take care of ourselves. We're out of time, but one thing I always like to end with is just a question to ask yourself is, what is bringing me joy? And whether that's what's bringing me joy today or what continues to bring me joy, that's just I always like to leave on a positive note. And so I'll say what brings me joy is I have 2 small kids who ask great questions. So my son this morning said, "Mom, do you know that when you die, there's 2 options. One, you could be buried, and the other, you could be roasted." And I said, "I don't understand what you mean." So apparently his older sister had told him or learned that somebody's dog had died and learned about cremation. And so that's what he said this morning, which really just brought me joy in the sense of he was so open and comfortable of talking about death, and it just made me laugh. So I always like to end on a high point of what is bringing you joy. So that's a question I'll leave you with.
I would like to point out that this has been recorded, and I'll maybe boil it back down, and it will be the 3rd of our educational series for Chapter 94 that will be posted to YouTube. And Norm, maybe as our secretary, he can take all the information, Sam's Facebook links, your suicide link, and put out one email, with all that information.
Yeah.
Well,
We
the only
will
thing I
take
love
care of
more
all
than
that.
talking is putting out email.
Yeah. No, we will do that. So again, thank you so much, Ann. I like that attitude of gratitude. So folks, we're going to wrap up for today so you can go enjoy watching the Nats lose. And my Pirates are getting annihilated. So please, my Pittsburgh Pirates they're under the cellar. So I only make jest. So next meeting, October 11th, 3 o'clock. That will be our usual support group where we're all going to talk and get to know each other better. All righty? All right, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for having
Take
me.
care. See you in a month.
Thank you.
Bye.